How do you show up for yourself? What fills your cup? Where do your values lie? All seemingly simple questions, but when asked, they can leave many of us quite stumped. Why is that? Maybe because we've put others first, become people pleasers, broken down our boundaries, or just have forgotten to touch base with our inner self, leaving us disconnected, unfulfilled, and searching for more. But do not despair. There's a way back to yourself, and today's guest, Master Certified Life and Business Coach, best-selling author, and podcast host, Angie Wisdom, is here to help us capture that inner spark once again. From mastering your mindset to implementing the non-negotiables needed to live your most inspired life, her techniques are unparalleled. And I should know, Angie has personally coached my husband, guiding him and my family to a life beyond our wildest dreams. And I cannot wait to share some of her life-affirming wisdom with you, cliche intended. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hi, Angie. I am so excited to have you on the podcast today. Welcome to Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers.
Thanks for having me, Courtney. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
I'm really excited because you coached my husband and you coached him through a time of a lot of growth. And I saw so much potential in him that, sometimes when you're close to someone, you can't bring it out of them as much as, as the wife. And I would ask him over and over again, when do you talk to Angie next? When do you talk to Angie next? Because you have a way of bringing such brilliance out of people and really helping them connect to who they truly are. And I think that's why I'm so excited to get to talk to you and really kind of get behind how you do this. I mean, it's wonderful. You've now written a book about it. You have your podcast, and I just want to hear more.
Thank you. Well, first of all, my goodness, thank you for those kind words. It's not often I get to kind of hear from the spouse of somebody that I coached. People sit in the seat with you and they share their growth and you hear it from their perspective. And you don't always get to hear it from the outside perspective of somebody else. And not always is the spouse so super supportive when somebody's growing so much. So I just love that you all honor each other that way and share that. So thank you.
Oh, it's wonderful. I mean, seriously, I'm just like, when can you get back on Angie's schedule? Because it's life-changing. I think anyone out there listening should have some sort of a personal coach in whatever avenue they're going down. I mean, I have my mentor, I have a spiritual coach. You do focus on more business and life, but I know you're really spiritual as well. You talk about in your book, I was actually just reading a little bit about it, about having faith in something bigger. And I think that is something that we all need to have in moments, especially of growth, because growth is hard.
It is. It's challenging. And I see it time and time again with people. If you don't have faith in something bigger than you, you tend to want to control everything that isn't yours to control. And so I like to put it in perspective like that. Your faith is what you can release all your uncontrollables to and trust that what's supposed to be will happen there. Otherwise, you'll drive yourself crazy, trying to do things that are really not in your control.
Well, and I think it also falls into this place of people pleasing when things are not in your control, that you just really try and manipulate the scenario. You try to manipulate situations. I know I say I'm a recovering people pleaser. I don't know if that I'm quite there yet, but it's really hard. And that I think dives a lot into what you talk about in your book is learning to own who you are authentically and get to know yourself. And that will allow you to kind of let go and have the control to let that faith in. So how do you approach that? How, as a coach, you've been doing this for how long now? Over 20 years, coaching people, helping them to get in touch with their authentic self. How do you do that? How do you really get to know yourself?
Well, first of all, I share that space with you, Courtney, in a sense that I was that people pleaser. And the funny thing is that I was even a coach back then. I coached people more from a performance perspective. And I believed that kind of being that people pleaser was part of my performance, right? If I could get people to like me, if I could, get people to think a certain way and please them and manipulate them into, things that I wanted, then that was aiding my performance. And it took me some time to realize how detrimental that was to me as a person, to be that people pleaser, and how really when you are in that space of people pleasing, you don't even know who you are. You don't even know what you love. And I would be faced with these questions like, well, what makes you happy? I'm like, well, when everyone else is happy. Well, what do you like to do? I'm good with what everyone else wants to do. And you realize it's like, oh my gosh, I have no identity of my own. I'm just plugged into everybody else and, got my cart hitched to theirs. And as long as they're good, I'm good. So that was kind of like the eye opener for me and going, wow, if I have to live a life of my joy only coming from making other people happy, like that's really scary. And that's and uncontrollable. So that really started my journey in changing that. And it becomes this process of, well, if you don't know those things about yourself, you don't know what you love and you don't know what fills you up and makes you happy and all of that, that's where it starts. And it's discovery. Most people pleasers don't have their authenticity and they don't know much about them. So it starts with creating a relationship with yourself.
And how do you do that? Like, where do you begin? I know years ago in therapy, I had that question posed to me, what makes you happy? And, it seems like such a simple question. And I've talked to another coach prior to this about the same thing. She coaches divorced moms and they lose themselves, especially moms. I think we lose ourselves very much so. Your children are older, so you've probably gotten a little bit more freedom. My kids are very young still, so they require a lot from me. But it's hard to really add that element in on top of it. You really do lose a sense of self. I mean, it seems like such an easy question. What do you like? What do you enjoy? What do you love? How did you find it for yourself?
It really goes back to your values. And you're right, it stumps a lot of people. I mean, it's the first thing I work on with my clients is going, what do you love? What fills you up? And sometimes people can rattle things off and other times they're like, oh my gosh, I don't even know. And so we have to go back to, okay, well, can you remember something 5 years ago, 10 years ago? Sometimes I have my clients that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and they're like, well, when I was in high school, and it goes back this long, long way before they lost themselves to like being a partner, to being executive, to being a parent, where you lose all those values. So I take people through their values and go, okay, well, let's go back to whatever memory you have when you were smiling, when you felt those butterflies in your stomach, when your heart was beating a little faster. Like, what were you doing? Where were you? Who were you with? So we start really kind of forming that discovery around those past moments. And you're like, oh, wow, well, I was in a golf tournament. Oh, what was good about it? I just love competing. I love being outside. I love being around people. And we start to say things like that. And then you pick up on those values. And then you start to share other stories and you start to find this commonality. Oh, well, when I was hiking here and I was outside and I was with my friends and you're like, okay, do we see a theme here? We love time in nature. We love to be social. So you pick up on those common threads that are called your values. And that is step one. Like now, at least we know what we can put into our life every day that fills us up and brings us joy.
And does that play with, I know you have your morning mindset journal that really, I think, helps you focus and tap into these things. So once you start to uncover these things, whether they're in the past, I mean, even I'm as you're talking, I'm going back, I'm like, okay, what did I love to do, And so it's kind of, I'm going through this in my own head. Once you start writing these down, do you start to include these into like a routine so that you can almost like relearn who you are?
Absolutely. You talk about living intentionally, right? And so now we're going to start intentionally building our day, which intentionally builds our life. So my morning mindset journal is a daily practice that actually encompasses the whole Non-Negotiable You book so that you have a way to get your values in. You have a way to live intentionally, to be your authentic self, to be responsible. So, the second step in my morning mindset journal is, what are your intentions for the day? So my intentions include part of my values. It's my responsibility to make sure that the things that I love show up in my life. And that's hard for people sometimes, right? Because we're like, oh, I don't have time. I've got to do this and I've got to do that, right? You're a mom and you have your company. But again, it's our responsibility to put them in if we want to be able to love ourselves and know who we truly are. We've got to give ourselves what we need. It starts there.
So how do you hold yourself accountable?
In the beginning, it's a little bit of like reminders. And, when people start their journey on, let's say, the morning mindset, it's like, oh, I forgot. Oh, I got into my emails and I forgot. And you have these pieces. So like any new habit, you're going to have to set yourself up for success, right? You brush your teeth every day. You make your coffee every day, like routine and habit. So the morning mindset, it's like, it's going to fall into that place for you eventually. But what are you going to do to remind yourself to do that every single day? And what is your word to yourself as far as accountability is concerned? So for me and for my clients, I would say, well, what's the first thing you do every day? And they're like, get coffee. Great. Go put your morning mindset journal down right next to your coffee maker. You see it, right? You do it. And I also like to bring in this idea of conscious choice. You're going to have feelings that want to lead you one way, like, well, I don't really feel like doing this. I feel like I have all this work to do. But you have your feelings that can lead you astray, or you have your values and going, but I want this life of authenticity that I get to create intentionally every single day. What are you choosing? Instant gratification, worry, stress, or this life?
Well, that's, I think, something I've talked about a lot is you choose your life. Your life is yours to decide what you do with it, how it looks. And I think a lot of us lose a sense of that, especially talking about people pleasers. We lose a part of that. We want to make sure that we're living up to other people's expectations or doing what we think is expected of us. It might not even be expected of us, but putting our value outside of us versus inside of us. And so I think that's a really important thing that you said, is that we have to make that conscious choice to, whether it's set intentions, whether it's to learn more about ourselves and have a relationship with ourselves. I even talk sometimes about like taking yourself out on a date, like dating yourself a little bit, just trying to get to know who you are in that piece, in that moment. Because when you go out on a date, if you go out like on a first date with someone, that's what you're doing. You're asking, where do you like to go? What do you like to do? You're getting to know people. And if we can treat ourselves somehow in that way, but there needs to be also that facade removed, because on a date, a lot of times we're going to put our best foot forward. We're not going to be so vulnerable. Like, how do you get vulnerable with yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a relationship. And I love where you're going with this as far as like dating yourself, because that's kind of what you do. If you sit down with your morning mindset journal every day in the morning for 10 minutes, you're spending time with yourself. And if you think about it, like the most important person in your life, you trust them, right? You rely on them, you respect them, you love them for who they are. Like all these things, that is the beautiful parts of a great relationship. But if you look at the relationship you have with yourself, you're probably missing so many of those. And why? It's because we don't spend our time with ourselves. So yeah, like you said, you date yourself, you spend time with yourself. The great thing about being vulnerable with yourself is that you have to know that like what you uncover, what you reveal is like a gold mine, because you get to do something with it. It's self-awareness. And without that knowledge, you don't have any ability to change. So I always say, if you don't know, you can't grow. So that vulnerability, we have to look at it as like this gift. When I'm vulnerable, I'm going to learn something about an opportunity or possibility within myself. And that's really exciting. Get to know yourself and to be able to make change, huge.
Yeah. But it's hard enough. It's hard to make that choice to want to change or live a better life or be your best or highest self. How do you approach it when you don't have outside support? Because I'm lucky. I have a very supportive husband in this. We both actually are on a path of self-growth, and we support each other on this path. And I feel very blessed to have a partner raising my children doing this, because I think if we can start young, like I'm sure you started this with your kids at a younger age. And you could help to build sort of an intentional mindset about their life. So when they grow up, they don't have to rediscover who they are. But if you are older, or if you're listening and you're just trying to learn how to get in touch with yourself and you don't really have that support, what do you do? Where do you go? Where do you find it?
I feel like you're setting me up to talk about the book, but really, I mean, that is the place.
I am.
It's like,
Yeah.
I mean, you laid it all out there for me, but it's really true. It's like the reason why I wrote this book is because I've sat down with clients for over 20 years and I've seen these changes create greatness in people. And not everybody is going to have the luxury to sit down in a coach's seat. Not everybody's going to have the luxury to be in a group with coaches or go to a seminar. And so literally I was like, I want to give the people the formula. The person who only has $12.99 to buy a book or maybe could get it gifted. I mean, my gosh, if you don't have $12.99 for the book, message me, I'll send you a copy. But it's like I wanted you people to have this ability to go, how can I really go through this process? And not just learn it and understand it, but what do I actually do on a daily basis to make it happen? Because that's the disconnect for most people is we've got a lot of great books out there, but it's books on knowledge and we learn things and then we're really great at regurgitating them to people, but we don't integrate them and implement them in our life so we don't experience the change. And it's not, what I've written is not rocket science.
Well, I think I heard someone say that, like, reading all these books just over and over and over again. And now I'm a writer. I write books. I ghostwrite books. I'm all for everyone reading books. But, I just heard something the other day that said, reading all the self-help books in the world is not going to cause you to change. It's actually going to lead to burnout. So how do we, I think what you're saying is great, that it's a very step-by-step process. It really lays it out. I think that's maybe where that burnout comes, where it's just like you get all this information and what do you do with it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you don't do anything with it, all it does is create a lack of confidence and a lower self-esteem, right? Because you're like, I learned all this and I know it. And people say that to me all the time. Like, I know all that, but I'm still the way I am. And so you almost tend to start beating yourself up more because it's like, if I know this, but I haven't done anything about it, what's wrong with me? Mm-hmm. But it's usually because we don't have the exact action steps available for us.
Yes.
Here's a great book on leadership. Be a great leader. But it's like, okay, what's step one? Just tell me one thing to do to start going in that direction. And that's what I was so mindful in being able to give people the practice, the morning mindset journal. There's a QR code, print out the sheet, and there you have your step-by-step process. And, when you think about it, going back to that relationship, if you think about what you give to your best relationship in your life, just give that to yourself. Mm-hmm. If you can take one of those things you give to your best relationship, give it back to you like you're your favorite person, you are on your way to change.
Well, and I can't hammer home enough. I cannot say enough how important it is to write things down. I think, as a writer, you're obviously a writer too. I think we gravitate towards things like that, journaling and writing. But even if you're not a writer, writing it down gives it a sense of permanence. It gives you almost like a roadmap. It gets it like my mentor will say to me, if you name it, you claim it. You're putting it out there into the universe. And so I think part of that, even if you're like, okay, I just need to start somewhere, like just write something. And I think that's where, I know your journal is very prompted that helps, if you aren't just the person that's going to go write pages in a book, find a journal like that, like your morning mindset journal that allows you to prompt where you're going and it guides you along your way. Because I feel like there's a lot of insight and epiphanies that happen when you can get quiet and you can write.
Oh, you're so right. Yeah. So right. If I have a feeling or an emotion and it sticks around, like I can't change that with my mind, that's my signal, like get out a piece of paper. And whatever I have, I write it at the top and then I brain dump. So if I'm all of a sudden stuck in this place of frustration or annoyance, and I'm like, oh, I can't shake this. What is going on? I take out a piece of paper and I write, I'm annoyed because, and then I just write everything down. You have no idea all of a sudden what you start writing out. And then you're like, oh, well, that explains it. I'm going to do this and this and this and this. But we can't see all that until it's on paper. It's just kind of stuck in the head. So 100, big proponent of writing. Yeah.
And what do you do with that? I always joke around. You can like burn it, you can bury it, you can drown it. Like literally that physical act of like removing it can just like this just showing it going down can like help you just release. I think even as a kid, I remember coming back, like having a fight with, there was always me and my like two girlfriends. There were like three of us, which is always a recipe for disaster when there's three. Two are always ganging up on one. And I remember having, me being the one on the outs one day and just coming home and like furiously writing in a journal. I mean, I think as kids, we're so instinctive about this. Like we know to do things like that. Have you seen that with your
diaries?
I think you have two sons, right? Yeah. Yeah. Have you seen that with your kids? Have they adopted what you're teaching?
My older one has. He's 19, and I've given them it, and I'm never one to like, hey, you have to do this or force it. I don't believe in that. People have to want it, and so I've never really required it or said this is part of your routine. But my older one has implemented it, and he loves it. I mean, it just gives him such a sense of like control in his day and what happens, and it's good for him. My younger one hasn't embraced it yet, and he definitely I know how much good it would do for him, but people have to come to that conclusion on their own, right? That I'm sure from working with people.
Yes, you can lead them to the water, but you can't make them drink, kind of thing. So what are the non-negotiables, do you say? Like what would you consider a non-negotiable for you or for anyone listening? Like what falls into that kind of a category? Because I know the whole name, the Non-Negotiable You, made me chuckle a little bit because it's my sister and her husband, when they got married, they put into place some non-negotiables in their relationship. So it kind of became a little bit of a joke, like, oh, that's non-negotiable. In my mind, I'm like, it's a relationship. There's always a compromise available.
Sure.
But, non-negotiables are there for a reason. And maybe they were onto something that I just wasn't like picking up on at the time. And so when I read the title of the book, it made me think about that. I'm like, so what is a non-negotiable and how do you implement that?
Yeah, my non-negotiables are, look, if I want to be non-negotiable about the dreams I have, about the success I want, about the life that I want, I have to be non-negotiable about who I am to going after it. And so what that looks like for me is having self-awareness, filling myself up with my values, mastering my mind so it's not controlling me, taking responsibility for what I want, showing up authentically, and trusting myself. That's it. Those are the 7 pieces of being the non-negotiable you. When you show up like that, you literally rise above all the nonsense. You're no longer limited by your beliefs. You're no longer worried about what everyone else thinks. You're no longer seeking everyone else's opinion and advice on what to do. You genuinely trust yourself. You love yourself, and you lead yourself better than anyone else could ever lead you. And that's the formula. And so I like how you're saying, well, like some things are negotiable. You're right. They are. But I always say, like, if I'm non-negotiable about this dream or this life and this business that I want, then it's non-negotiable. I show up this way. Because as soon as I start to not trust myself, or as soon as I start to like letting my mind control me, I'm stepping further and further away from what I want.
Well, that mind control, mindset, this whole concept of mindset is such a big hot topic right now. Like, how do you make those mindset shifts? How do you control your mind? Because our minds, I don't even know, like our minds have a mind of their own almost, like you can say, I want to control it. I don't want these limiting thoughts in. When they do come in, because inevitably they will. Their habits. How do you overcome that? How do you focus your mindset where you want it to be and overcome those limiting beliefs when they do come in?
Yeah, two ways. Proactively, meaning like in that morning, when you're doing your morning mindset, you're proactively feeding your mind what you want. So all the stuff that's in there, it's been running on, we can't just go, I don't want to think that anymore and think that it's going to be gone. We have to replace it. So what we're doing is rewiring proactively. So when you write your affirmations, when you do your gratitude, all of that, we are now putting those thoughts in. We're feeding our mind this every single day. Eventually, that starts to rewire. But then the other piece of it is from a responsive standpoint. And what I mean by that is in the moment when that thought pops up to you, like, wow, I'm not good enough, or this is never going to work, we go back to our responsibility and say, okay, that's the thought I have right now. What do I want to do with it? I have a choice. I'm going to delete it. I'm going to replace it. I'm going to challenge it, but it's your responsibility to do something with it. It's hard to do the responsive part if you aren't doing that proactively rewiring, right? Because it's almost like in the moment, you hope that you can master your mindset. But if you haven't been doing anything on a consistent daily basis to create that habit, it's going to be hard to do it in that moment when it's like fight or flight, right?
Well, and for a lot of us, we've been doing it for a lot of years. These thoughts, I mean, limiting beliefs are thoughts that are recurring from, generations. There's a lot of talk about generational trauma or breaking generational practices. And that's almost embedded in you. It's almost like you need to learn how to wipe your hard drive clear. And how do you do that? And it's even can come from people outside of you imposing their limiting beliefs on you. I know that stuff I'm sure Matt talked to you about in his sessions, having outside influences and those outside opinions, even if you want them not there, they exist.
Sure.
We don't exist in a bubble. So how do we maintain our focus and maintain our strength, especially when we are trying to rewire and reclaim our mind and our mindset?
That's why it's so important to have that daily practice of filling it up proactively, because it's kind of like putting on your armor. If you do that every single day, then when it's time for you to be challenged in that moment, this is not your first rodeo, right? You're like, I've been telling myself who I am every single day. I've been affirming myself. I've been finding gratitude. I've been changing my perspective on things. Like, I know how to do this. And so you really are empowered in that moment. And, part of it too is being present, right? You've got to be present enough to catch that and to do something about it. And we're all going to have moments, right, where we're challenged a little bit more. It hits a little bit more close to home. So we're not going to be perfect in this, but just being aware, catching that thought, and then deciding what to do with it. The past beliefs and experiences, what you mentioned, the ones that are ingrained so deeply, sometimes that's what you do need a therapist or a coach for, right? You've got to really dig through that to figure out why that's showing up and process that and get over it. But most people don't realize, like, oh, wow, this is that belief from 25 years ago. Like, you don't realize that it's coming from something so long ago that isn't even relevant anymore, that you're giving so much credit to. So it's important that you kind of dig a little bit and figure out where is that stemming from. And I love to, basically negate it. Is that true anymore? Do you still believe that? Sometimes we have to ask those questions and then we're like, well, no, of course not. How can you prove that wrong?
Yeah, it's definitely a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. And I think I know from in my experience, I'm a very impatient person, and I'm also a very like I want to go, just do it, get it done. But you have to allow the process to happen. And sometimes you have to allow yourself go through these feelings and emotions. But even like you were talking about just a little bit ago about the trusting yourself, finding that trust in yourself. And I was just actually, before we jumped on, reading the part of your book that was saying, trusting yourself doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. And I think that's a huge thing to know, that you don't need to be perfect, even in this journey of learning to uncover who you are authentically at all. Like, none of this, the lessons are going to come from the losses or the failures, for lack of a better word, sometimes.
All the time. I mean, I joke with people in the Morning Mindset Journal. It asks you if on your reflection, it says, did you accomplish your intentions and what got in the way? And I'm like, I love that. It's my favorite part. Like, I have no problem saying I didn't accomplish my intentions or finding that awareness of what got in the way. Like, failure gives us lessons, mistakes, lack of perfection, all of that is an opportunity. So I welcome that every single day. It's like, where's my 1%? How can I do a little better? How can I be a little better? And there's nothing more rewarding than learning so much about yourself that you become your very best, like, puppeteer, right? You know exactly how to maneuver yourself and lead yourself to get exactly what you want and live the way you want. And that comes with mistakes and failures, no doubt.
Well, even on like the spiritual level, on the more intuitive side, I was actually just having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day that she said she reads tarot, and she pulled out tarot cards, and there's two cards in there that like everyone freaks out when they get the Tower card or the Death card, and it's like, oh my goodness, that means everything's crumbling down. And she's like, I celebrate that, because that means something is falling apart for something better to come in. It's like, it's these lessons, these things that feel like they're falling apart. And in the moment, they can be really hard, but it allows you a platform for growth and learning and experiencing something new. So I think that's a really important takeaway, is when you have those failures, how can I be a little bit better, or what can I learn from this and grow? And that, I think, I mean, you're the expert in it, but will help you also get in touch with who you are on an authentic level, how you maneuver through these moments, where you want to go from them, how you grow from them. I think those are big elements of learning who you are within.
Yeah, you're absolutely. It's all part of the process and learning. And what you just described there is mastering your mindset. When you do that cognitive reframing that you said, right? Like, well, this is the Death card, but I'm celebrating it. You've just taught your mind that you can choose to see things any way you want. And that is the foundation of mastering your mind. And it's why gratitude is so important, because we can find gratitude for the good things, which is fine, but finding gratitude for the things that maybe don't seem good in the beginning is what allows us to find the good in them, just like your friend said. So I love that. And yeah, all of it gives us lessons.
Well, I would think, I mean, most people, and most scenarios, not everything. There are certain things that people will say that the bad or whatever fell apart wasn't great, but usually it's a blessing in disguise. Usually there's a silver lining to it. I think once we can gain a little bit of insight, once we step past the emotional aspect of whatever it is that we are falling apart or working on, which I'm sure you see a lot of in your practice, because I don't think a lot of people are searching for a coach or a directive when everything is perfect in their life, when everything is great. I mean, do you get people that come to you just be like, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you get people that are, because you do a lot of business coaching, like things are good, but now I want to grow my business to another level. But I imagine a lot of people come to you when they're experiencing something in their life that they want more, or they want to change, or things are not going their way. So can you talk a little bit about that and how you help people begin to navigate that experience?
It's so interesting you say that, because I have a group, and we were meeting yesterday, and they've evolved. They've been with me for, gosh, I think 2 years now, and it's a great group of people. And they were talking about how they have some one-on-one time with me, and somebody said, well, I'm saving up all those for when things are bad. And when things fall apart, they're like my disaster sessions. And I was like, well, that's a really interesting way to look at it, because that's how some people come into coaching, right? Like, I have this problem, I have this challenge, life is horrible, like, help me. But there's a whole nother area of coaching, and people get to eventually where it's like, wow, I have this space, I have this capacity, I have this confidence, like, help me figure out what to do with it. And that's really in that elevated state. Like, you kind of come into your best self. You're still going to have challenges and problems, but you really know how to handle them because you lead yourself and you trust yourself. And then you get to this place where it's like, wow, now what? Like, what am I truly put here to do?
Yeah.
What am I inspired to do? And how am I going to like impact the world? And that's special. So it's just interesting you kind of made that comment. But coming from the place of needing help and challenges, it's, we just have to break it down and go, okay, well, what do you want to be differently? What's in your way of it being that way? Everyone that comes to coaching, they want something. I want joy.
Right.
I want to be less stressed. I want peace. I want love, like whatever it may be. Okay, let's talk about what you want. What's getting in the way of you having it? And that kind of leads our path to a conversation to say, let's make it happen. But we've got to have that awareness around, what do you want to be different, and what's the obstacle in front of you?
Well, if someone was looking to do coaching with you, how would they find you?
You can go to my website, angiewisdom.com. It's the best place to find me. There's not too many wisdoms out there, so I'm pretty easy to find on all the platforms, YouTube, LinkedIn, everything like that. And, of course, the book is on Amazon as well. So.
And congratulations, your book hit #1 on the first release of it. That's very exciting. I have it right here, just reading it myself. Actually, my husband is in it. You wrote about him, so it's really exciting to see. But there's on a personal level, I always wanted to know, where did the wisdom come from in your name? You did not create that for your title, right? That was like your name.
It was not mine by birth, but it was mine by marriage. And it was my husband's name. And I always say, just as a disclaimer, like I married long ago, I've been married 26 years before I ever started this business. So it wasn't just to get the name,
That's funny. Does your husband really support this and this work? And is he into it as well?
He's the most supportive person in the world. He just, when I wanted to write the book, he was like, awesome, can't wait to read it. He was the first person to read it and give me support around it. So he loves it. I'm blessed. I happen to be married to somebody who kind of embodies a lot of this non-negotiable you already. And he's been an inspiration to me. So it's been really fun to do it together.
That's what I always talk about. It's like finding your tribe. It may not be your spouse. It may not be a friend. It could be an online community. It could be a social media site, but having that support somewhere outside of you that you can lean on, especially when you're getting some of that outside influence and you're just kind of questioning yourself, finding the people that you can connect with on this journey makes all the difference, whether it's a podcast or a coach or a therapist. I mean, I've had them all and wonderful things come from joining a community like that. So I really appreciate you building your community. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me and all the wonderful things that you've done for me and my family on a personal level. You've really taken us to the next level, and you are a wonderful coach. So anyone that's looking for a coach, they should definitely come to your site and get a session with you at least.
Thank you, Courtney. This is a first for me, being on a podcast of a client that I coach. So brand new for me and super exciting. And it's just been a joy to kind of, like I said, hear it from a different perspective. Instead of just your husband, you seeing that is just such an affirmation. And I'm so glad it happened.
Well, I think that's great too, when you can, even not for you, like when your spouse, like let's say it is your spouse going through coaching or therapy or whatever outside source like that. If your spouse or your friend or your parent can really notice those changes in you, it helps you to continue on. It gives you that confidence, like I'm going in the right direction. So once again, that's talking about a tribe, but I like to share when, you're making a great impact and a huge impact on the world. And it's really just beautiful to see. And I love everything you're doing.
Thanks so much, Courtney. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And I will hopefully talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
And that's it for today's Intentional Living with Courtney Meyers. Thank you so much for listening. And thank you, Angie Wisdom, for joining me in this great conversation all about mindset, living authentically, and living with intention. Also, learning to trust yourself. That's the missing piece. We all need to learn to trust ourselves. You can find Angie on her website, on all the social sites, and you can find her book on Amazon. I will put links to everything in the show notes. And you can find the Intentional Home and Living at CourtneyMyers.com, on YouTube, and on our social accounts. Pretty soon, keep your eyes open. We will also be launching intentional media. I'm really excited about that. That's the future of the intentional living world. So stay tuned for that information, and I will talk to you next week. Bye.